So why do single dad households have better outcomes than single moms? I remember not being a huge Kobe Bryant fan. Felt like he shot too much. It's just like, dude, pass the ball. And then I would see these highlights and I'd watch the game and I'm like, man, he's missing a lot. But then I took a step back and I realized the reason why there's so many lowlights, why there's so many misses, and why it's easy to blame him is because he's the only one who's taking shots. The reason why single dads have better outcomes than single moms, it's not because they're better parents. It's because there's less of them.
Wait till I get my money right.
The audience comes last.
How can that be?
Well, the audience doesn't know what they want. The audience only knows what's come before.
4 months of late nights and early mornings, all culminating in this one moment. The IBEW Aptitude test. 36 questions designed to prove that I'm worthy of being an electrician. And if I had known that things might not go how I planned, I might not have told you about it. That's the problem with documenting your life. You never really know how the story you're telling is going to end. And there's always someone watching with an opinion on what you could have done different. But it's moments like this where I'm glad that the crowd isn't any bigger. Well, I took the test and I just didn't pass. Like, no excuse. It was definitely harder than I expected it to be, but I did study and I was confident. Like, I probably knew what I thought was 80% of the material, but what messed me up was the fact that I studied the wrong material. I got a bunch of YouTube videos that I thought were a pretty decent source, and I was doing the math right along with the teacher. I filled up 2 notebooks worth of stuff. Like, I really did my homework. The problem is, it was the wrong subject. I don't know what I'm gonna do now. Like, obviously, I can retake the test, but it's not gonna be for at least 90 days. I'm not really thinking about it in this particular moment. I definitely know that if I retake the test, I'm gonna take a real course. I'm gonna go find, I think it's the iPrep course that I've heard a lot of people talk about. Seems like that one's a pretty reliable source. I knew I was in trouble when I was at like question 19 and there was maybe 10 minutes left on the test and I have like 30 something questions, 33 questions. And I wasn't done. Like, I felt good about the stuff I was doing, but also I wasn't moving through the test fast enough. There just was not a lot of like gimme questions. When I really expected there to be a lot of very simple, you can look at it and you can tell the answer. All of them felt like you needed to do a little bit of work, and that definitely slowed me down. So I need to get to the point where I'm very comfortable doing this very quickly. It'd be like negative on one answer, then it'd be a positive on the other answer, then the other one would have 2 numbers switched around. And if you got any kind of dyslexia, I could definitely see you getting tripped up. I don't know, I'm mad at myself because I was so close. Like, I think I was like 1 point off of passing, and that probably makes me feel worse because it's like if I had just gotten a couple of questions right, I could have passed, or if I guessed differently, I could have passed. Now I gotta wait several months to redo this thing, but for now I'm just trying to look at the bright side. And with that, I think I'm gonna focus on my creativity a little bit. So our good friends at Tellison sent me this rose-colored filter, and I couldn't think of what to do with it, but after having a really disappointing day, I figured I would use it to try to see life through rose-colored glasses. It's so on the nose, it's disgusting. I've already accepted that I'm back to zero, but I feel so much better when I finally get off the starting block. Obviously, I'm trying to be positive, but there's definitely been situations in my life that I had no idea could turn around so dramatically. I don't know if this is that, but
Hey, buddy, you want
it's
to go to
possible.
bed? You come.
It's another reset. Cleaning up, fixing my mess, and figuring out what's next. I don't mind documenting but it's when do I publish this? When do I publish that I'm going on this journey? And I chose to publish that a little bit sooner than I guess now I should have. You never really know where you're going to end up, or at least that's probably the biggest lesson that I learned as a creative. Small things become big things, but it's not necessarily a linear path. It's not A to B. Sometimes it's A to T to Q to R to B to Z. In hindsight, you see it, but at the time, it feels like a failure. When I think back on my creative career, the moment that everything changed for me at the time was also the greatest failure that I had ever had. December, I had just landed the biggest job at the time that I'd ever had. And if you're a creative, then you know that typically things slow down. I was cooking. And then 3 days into the project, it completely fell apart. Everyone pulled out, and I was all of a sudden unemployed. So with all my new free time, I took my son to breakfast one morning, and I ran into an old friend who was surprised that I was available for work. He talked about a project that was coming up, and he thought maybe he could get me in. And I didn't hear from him for a few months. And then when he eventually did call, I didn't stop working for years. Looking back now, I know losing that job was the catalyst, but I couldn't see that this door closing meant a huge window for opportunity was about to open up. So I'm not that discouraged. I did study. I put hours upon hours of effort in. Unfortunately, I was just studying the wrong material, and that's still my fault, but I'm okay with that because I was doing something. And as long as you're doing something, there's always going to be something to criticize. There's always going to be something to look at. There's always going to be something that someone else isn't doing that they can point at. You can learn just as much from your failures as you can your successes. When you succeed, then things just worked out. Sometimes you just got lucky. Sometimes it's right place, right time. But when you fail, that's when you really dig deep. You work harder. You figure things out. Then you examine exactly what happened and how you can prevent that from ever happening again. Not doing something means you also didn't gain the experience that you would have gotten if you had. And even though I failed, at least now I know what actually is on the test. So I have a better shot at doing better next time. So I'm not even calling this a failure. It's just a change of plans. Speaking of change of plans, it's amazing that 2 months ago, I was getting wheeled back for emergency facial surgery, worried that I might not be going home. And now, my biggest worry is when I'm going to retake this test. I didn't want to be seen in public because I was covered in bandages. And now, it feels like a distant memory. I'm not quite back to 100%, but at this point, sometimes I totally forget that it happened. Seeing the world through rose-colored glasses. That expression is typically a criticism. It means that you kind of forget the bad things about a situation and you only focus on the positives. So you're not really paying attention and you're not seeing the reality of the situation that you now find yourself in. And while that's true, I'm focusing more on the part where we're simply not changing what did happen and simply focusing on changing our perspective, which is why this filter arrived at the perfect moment, because I think I just need to start seeing the world a little bit different. They actually sent me a bundle of accessories, which I'm really excited to get into, but I didn't really know what I would do with this. But ironically, the day it arrived, I went to go see the back rooms. And while I was in there, I was noticing that there was like this pinkish, purpley hue on all the walls whenever they're doing the daytime scenes inside the therapist's office. And it occurred to me, that's what this filter is. Now, I'm definitely not saying that they use this particular filter in order to make the film, but they probably either use color or they use some type of filter in order to put that pinkish hue into their footage. But with that said, I actually also forgot my microphone, so I'm gonna have to do this with in-camera audio, so forgive me. Yes, I failed my aptitude test, which means the next 3 months are gonna be completely different than I had planned, but I am a creative, and I do have a bunch of creative opportunities, and I think that's what I should focus on. So this lens is not just a metaphoric representation of that, it is a physical manifestation of me embracing creativity despite some pretty negative circumstances. The other thing is that I did previously pass my construction electrician's test, so it doesn't mean that I can't pursue this line of work. It just means that either I can start not the way I wanted to start or delay starting the way I did. I was having to decide between these two paths before, and now maybe this makes it a little bit easier, but also maybe if I decide I really want to be an apprentice, then I'll wait, keep doing creative stuff, and then when the time comes, I'll retest. Which part of the failure do you want to focus on? What could have been, or the new possibilities that are actually available? And personally, I'm just gonna try to be positive about it. Kind of like how I don't have my microphone, but this gives me an opportunity to remember that the onboard audio is actually pretty decent on this camera. This Rose filter is unique. Like, it's definitely not something you're gonna see everywhere, and it's definitely not something I've seen a lot of online, which is why I was initially taken aback when I even saw it as an option. But I do love the way the Telesin filters stack very nicely. I have a couple of other brands filters that, even though they're all magnetic, they just don't stack as well as the Telesin filters do. So props to them for that. I'm gonna get back home, make some breakfast, and enjoy the fact that I can, because I still have a little bit more time to do that with my son before I get back to work. If you guys are interested in this filter, check the link in the description below. Thank you for Telesin for sending this out to me and reminding me that at the end of the day, I'm still a creative.
It's perspective, which angle you looking from? When you take a chance, ever wonder who you took it from?
When you take shots in public, there's always a chance that someone's watching. But there's a big difference between being a player and a spectator. The thing that I now appreciate about Kobe is his ability to keep shooting even when he wasn't making it. Privately, it's easy, but in public, even with the scrutiny and the crowd and the opinions, I realize now just how admirable that is. And that's perspective. Perspective is probably the reason that I fell in love with film in the first place. The ability to take a piece of glass and put it in front of a camera and change the way you see the world is incredibly poetic. And the situations that I've found myself in over the last few years, I think have allowed me to make some of my most important art to date. Until I'd actually gone through some of these experiences, I simply lacked the perspective to be able to tell these stories. Seeing Kobe miss all those shots at the time just seemed like a ball hog who wants to score a lot of points. But as I've changed my perspective and stepped back and listened to some of his own words and heard some of his teammates, you know, it's just a frustrated guy who wants to win, who doesn't see any other way to make it happen unless he steps up. It's the same as watching a single mother struggle to try to provide for her kids. You can look at it as this person made bad decisions, or you can have compassion and just realize we're all just trying to make it no matter what situation we find ourselves in. And I choose the path of empathy, and it's become easier to understand as my situation has changed. I've gone from a loving two-parent household to going back and forth with co-parenting to now being a full-time solo dad. And each one of those things has given me a little bit more insight on what it's like when you're doing everything by yourself. Now, with that said, seeing the world through rose-colored glasses is only one of those perspectives. It's not necessarily the best one. It's seeing only the positives in the situation and completely ignoring the negatives. And I'm not quite sure that's what I want to do. So there's definitely a time and place for it. As a creative, I can simply add or remove this filter. But as a father, I got some real decisions to make. So I'm not really looking to escape my reality. But I am thankful that I have the tools to change the way I see things, even if it's just for a little bit.
Sometimes you shoot the ball and you release it, and the trajectory feels good, your follow through is good, it's right there on target, it's in line, you're keeping the follow through up in the air, and then it goes short. But it feels good. So, you know, it's kind of like a shock to miss those sometimes.